Our Weather Water Cooler series gives us a chance to chat with graduates of the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science who work in all sectors of the weather and climate enterprise. Today, we're joined by a 1998 graduate who works as an associate professor at the Department of Geography and Meteorology at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dave Call. Dave, welcome to Weather World.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Dave, it's a fun fact here. You were actually the first student meteorologist on Weather World back in 1998. Talk about your experiences working with Paul Knight, Fred Gadomsky, and others.
You know, reflecting ahead of time of this interview, Paul, Fred, and Lee Grenzy really helped shape me into who I became. In 1998, I was finishing up my degree. I was actually working in Erie part-time in my last semester, and Fred and Paul approached me. They said they wanted to start bringing undergraduates onto the program, and they felt, given that I had some experience, they were going to ask me to do it first. I'd grown up watching Weather World, so it was just quite an honor to have them ask me. And so I went on air, and I was quite nervous, but I made it through. We always do. And that was just such a great honor. And Lee Grenzy had a program he ran where he had a series of undergraduate teaching assistants for Meteo 3, the introductory class that lots of students took across the university. So I got a chance to do some teaching then. And I liked it so much that I started teaching part-time at Penn State Erie on the side while I was working in television there. Eventually, I went back to school, got my PhD, and became a professor. So all three of them really had a big influence on who I've become.
Take us through more of your career journey. What eventually led you to Ball State?
Well, I was working in television in Erie, but I was teaching on the side at Penn State Erie, Meteo 3. So I went to graduate school at Syracuse University in geography because I really wanted to understand how the weather affected society. And then I worked part-time in TV while I was there. When I went to graduate, I was open to either field, but the position at Ball State was advertised and it was the perfect fit for my skills. I got to teach the classes I wanted to teach, including broadcast meteorology. I liked the colleagues. It was just a great fit, a good balance of teaching and research, and I've been here ever since.
Talk a little bit about what you do at Ball State, especially with regards to teaching broadcast meteorology.
Well, here at Ball State, I teach our broadcast class. I teach it a lot like Fred taught it to me. I throw them in the studio right the first week. We're over in the studio once a week practicing our presentations. And then the other day of the week, we're learning about different aspects of the broadcast industry. And here I'm best known actually for our storm chasing class. I take students out storm chasing every summer. I've done 18 trips, covered more than 120,000 miles. It's a really great chance for students to learn how to forecast extreme weather in a low stakes situation.
Going back to your research, Dave, what we wanted to really talk about today was the fact that you actually wrote a book all about the Superstorm of 1950. What about that storm made you want to focus your research on that area?
I first learned about the storm when I was working on my thesis. I knew it was a big snowstorm in Pennsylvania and Ohio and West Virginia. But after a while, I started to realize that it was an incredible hurricane-like storm in the Northeast, an incredible cold spell in the South, and there wasn't much on that. So I started researching those other impacts, and it led me down some interesting pathways. Race, gender, and class really had influenced who was affected by the storm, and we see those threads again today. In the case of Superstorm 1950, we had an incredible ice storm in Altoona, one of the worst ice storms probably in Pennsylvania history. Meanwhile, though, we've got incredible wind damage through Vermont. So you have crews that are stretched thin. And of course, they can't move around because there's snow and flooding and all these problems everywhere. And it's a good reminder of the importance of being resilient. The record cold in the South, records that nothing had ever been close to that before in November, and nothing has ever been close since. Inconceivable levels of cold air. But on the other hand, the other thing that really fascinated me was some of the impacts. Again, a storm like this, the impacts are so spread out, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that since 1950, we've only had 2 weather events that have been more deadly in this country, both hurricanes. Here we had deaths all throughout the snow areas, people from heart attacks, shoveling snow, walking through snow. And finally, there were some fascinating societal impacts. In Massachusetts, a woman was murdered during the height of the storm and nobody could hear because the power was out and the winds were gusting to hurricane force.
So for people who want to read more about Superstorm 1950, where can they get a copy of your new book?
The book's going to be available on Amazon starting in January. You can also order it directly from Purdue University Press or your favorite bookseller.
What's next for you in your life career? Any storm events that you want to dig deeper on?
I'm working on a second book right now. This book is going to be a combination of two stories. The one story is about my storm chasing adventures over the years and my quest to get that quintessential picture of a tornado over my shoulder that every storm chaser wants. So it's somewhat of a memoir. But the other thread in the book is going to be the latest on how we study storms, talking about thunderstorms, and how we forecast tornadoes and use radar. It's going to be meant for a general audience, for the people that are excited about storms, want to know more about what meteorologists are doing to help understand thunderstorms and tornadoes better.
So when you're not studying Superstorm 1950 or some of these other big events or teaching or a myriad of the other things that you do, storm chasing, what do you like to do in your free time?
I have all sorts of interesting little hobbies. I like to restore antique traffic lights, the old metal ones, some of the ones that you see that are four ways. And I guess I've got a collection now because I've got around 7 of them, plus enough parts to probably build an 8th.
Well, Dave, thanks so much for being with us here today on Weather World.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure to reminisce about my great experiences in the past.
Dr. Dave Call, an associate professor of geography and meteorology at Ball State and a 1998 graduate here of Penn State. And we'll be back in just a moment with more.